All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. This video is going to be another in my series of New Jersey hardcore, New Jersey punk from the 1980s. Um, as I've been doing these videos, a lot of people I've had on as guests have made recommendations for people I should talk to. And two names have come up pretty frequently. One was Peter Aaron from Sand in the Face. So, of course, I had to have Peter on a couple months back. And the second name that was said quite often is my guest joining me today. I'm really happy to be joined from the band Bodies in Panic, Mr. Kyle Eaves. Kyle, good to see you, my friend. Thanks for being here.
Hi.
Yeah, we got a lot to get into, man. As I've been learning more about the scene and the era that happened before my entry point into the whole thing. I've learned about a lot of different bands, a lot of different eras. I just had your worthy constituent, Mr. Greg Walker, on a couple weeks back from Bodies in Panic, and he's been telling me for a while I had to get you on, so I'm happy you're here. And as I said to the viewer who may not know Kyle, he was the singer in Bodies in Panic, which was an early 80s New Jersey punk slash hardcore band, one of the groups on Buy Our Records, which has come up quite a bit on this channel. So you fit in perfectly with some of the other people I've had on and the characters and just this time frame I've been focusing on. So before we get into music, tell me a little bit about life in general. Are you originally from New Jersey?
Yeah. I went to high school in New Jersey. My first 3 years of high school, I went to Jonathan Dayton Regional High School in Springfield, and then I graduated in Ridge High, Basking Ridge, and I moved out to. Well, I went to college at Kutztown, Pennsylvania, and then I moved out to California, LA here for a couple of years, and then back to Jersey,
Hmm.
and then lived there until '95, I guess, and then I moved down to Florida. And then in 23, I moved up to Delaware, and that's where I live now in Georgetown, Delaware,
Okay, fantastic.
which
So
is southern Delaware. So Delaware has 3 counties: Newcastle in the north, where your recent podcast guest Sid Sludge is from, and the middle county is Kent, and the southernmost county is Sussex, where I live in the city of Georgetown.
excellent, excellent. Yeah, that Sid Sludge interview was a lot of fun. He was an
Interesting, yeah.
guy. Yes, to put it mildly, interesting guy. And somebody who a lot of people thought was dead, So obviously that's not the case. I don't have a Ouija board in front of me. I didn't conjure up Sid Sludge. He's actually alive. So happy to have him on. So as far as the Jersey thing, when did music really take hold of you to where you'd end up eventually singing in Bodies in Panic?
All right, well, my music interest is kind of interesting, at least interesting to me. I don't know if anybody else will find it interesting, but anyway, I really didn't listen to music when I was real young. And then as I got into high school, uh, my brother listened to music. He was about a year younger than me, and he liked Black Sabbath and Deep Purple, and Yes, and all those kind of bands, Pink Floyd. And I liked Black Sabbath and Deep Purple when I heard them. I thought that was good. And then I started hearing bands like the Shy Lights, who I liked, and just all different kind of music I started to become aware of. And then when I went to college at Kutztown, I was listening to like Bread and Linda Ronstadt, and then I got into George Thorogood and Destroyers, Chuck Berry, all kinds of different stuff. Like I never had like one particular interest in music. I liked the whole different varieties of music. But then when I was at Kutztown, I moved off campus eventually. When I was there about my third year to a place called the Lutheran Center, and there was only 5 people in the house, and they had an office downstairs for the pastor or whatever minister. And so I lived. I had my own little room, and it was like the size of a closet. Really, it was a dresser and a bed, and that was it. And then there were two guys on the other side, and then two women, a young woman, on the other in the other room. So there's three bedrooms up there and a kitchen and a living room. But anyway, these guys, Brian and Drew, they used to go to New York City all the time. Brian was a music major and Drew was an art major, and so I believe, they were going to CBGBs and they made recordings of the Ramones and the B-52s. And I had never heard that kind of music before, and it just like struck a real chord in me that the speed of the music and like comedy, or like this element of humor that before I thought music was always kind of serious in trying to get you to feel a certain thing, but the speed of the Ramones, and they're not even that fast, if you compare them to like AOD or something, but for listening to Black Sabbath, the Ramones are fast, and so I really like that and the energy of it, and it said like I like the humor of the B-52s, and then they these guys they got a Sex Pistols record, and my mind was completely blown. And shortly after that, I moved out to California, and so like I'm right in the middle of the LA scene, and I had a cousin named John. Well, I still do, but he lives out there, and so like I was staying at my aunt's house for the first few weeks I was there, and then he came home one day and he said, "Hey, I got his 45. You got to listen to this." And it was Dead Kennedy's "Holiday in Cambodia." And I was like, oh, "Wow, this is great. This is what I've been waiting to hear." It was just the speed, the lyrics. It was just, and the sound of it. It's just so unique, and I loved it. And so, like, I started going to the Whiskey a Go Go and all these different places, and I saw the Dead Kennedys live. I saw the Go Go's, and one of the best mosh pits I ever saw was the Go Go's, believe it or not. And the
Mhm.
Go Go's were a lot different band before they put out their record. They
Yeah.
just had more energy and like more rock, and they just kind of turned more pop, I guess, on the record. But anyway, uh, I saw a lot of good shows there, and then I saw bands like X at the Roxy and Fear at the Starwood, and I just was going to shows all the time. And but I also saw other kind of bands like Jonathan Richman. I saw in Santa Monica, the Modern Lovers. Do you know him, Jonathan Richman, the Modern Lovers?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, and he's great. And he was just playing by himself, playing his guitar and sitting down in a little stool. And he played one set, then he took a break and did another set. And during the break, I had to go to the restroom. This place was like an old restaurant, and the bathroom's downstairs. So he was sitting in this little alcove in the middle level of this place, and I had to walk past him. He's just sitting there. So I talked to him for about 15 minutes. He's just a really cool guy. But then, like that experience, I was out in California 2 years, and then I guess this is like '81. I moved back to New Jersey, where my parents lived, and then I guess I was listening to different kind of music. When I was out in California too, I listened to KROQ, like Rodney on the Rock.
Hmm.
You ever hear of him?
Sure.
Yeah. So, um, that's where I heard a lot of the music too that I got into. So I brought all this back with me in my head, and I thought like I'd like to do something like that. And then there was a magazine back then called The Aquarian,
Hmm.
and I I saw an ad in there, and I answered it, and they said, "Well, yeah, come on down." And it was Gavin McNett and Greg Walker and Mike Pekarofsky. Oh, just call him Mike Peck. And Gavin is now going by Gavin Von M.
Hmm.
Uh, and so anyway, those three guys were there in Gavin's basement in Short Hills, and we tried to do a couple songs with me singing, and it worked out pretty good, I thought. And then they said, "Yeah, you're in," and it went on from there.
And that was Bodies in Panic.
Yeah,
Um, where did the band typically play? I'd imagine you were playing the spots in Jersey and
yeah.
New York as well.
Yeah, yeah. We played like an Anthrax in Connecticut, but we played like Patrick's, the Court Tavern,
Mm,
uh, and just like we play like in Rutgers and but anywhere with like people's yards or driveways, like we play anywhere. And but there always seems like something was happening in between New York, and then we played CBGB's a bunch of times
mm.
once we got going. Um, so it just seemed like I'd say in a month we would play 4 or 5 times, and also on the weekend for the most part, like 99% of the time is on the weekend. But and then I would say we would in a month we would play out 4 or 5 times, and we rehearse 1 or 2 times, and we would rehearse. Eventually, wound up rehearsing once. There's a few lineup changes, but uh, the main after we stopped practicing Gavin's basement, started practicing Greg's basement at his mom's house in Union, and we kind of became known as a Union band. And I felt like I was like an adopted son of Union, even though I never lived there because I hung out with those guys a lot, well, like all the Union guys.
So, you said you were kind of adopted into Union, so that would be like the Bedlam guys.
Yep,
I think Paul Richards from Union as
yep.
well, AOD.
Yeah, Greg and Mike were. I'm not sure. Is Lenny from Union? Lenny Spondorio?
I can't recall. Lenny's been on the channel. He may have mentioned it, but I can't recall at the moment where he's originally from.
He was always around, though. I can tell you that. Wayne was from Union, and
Mm.
Brian Summer, and so a lot of a lot of those guys that I would hang out with.
Right. And of course, I think Ron Nolan, the accelerators were out there in Union too.
Yeah, yeah. I never saw the Accelerators, but I'm good friends with Ron. We speak on the phone once in a while, but mostly you message me like for a holiday, you'll say like Happy Father's Day or whatever. And
Yeah,
but
he's really good at that. That's typically what I hear from him as well. I've known Ron
yeah,
for a long time, about 30 years.
yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah, totally, totally nice guy. Um, of course he was in he later ended up in the Parasites, and I think Gavin was in the Parasites at one point too.
He might have been. He played in a few different bands.
Yeah, yeah.
I
So
think he played with Artless Michael Board.
right, Michael Board. Yeah, that's a name that I'm glad finally has been mentioned on this
You
channel.
should interview him.
Yeah, I really should. I love Michael's writing. He's one of my favorite writers.
Yeah, he's very contrary, but in
Yes.
an interesting way, makes you think.
Yeah, he was always my favorite writer back when he was writing for Maximum Rock and Roll.
Yeah.
Um, Definitely an interesting take on the world, very insightful guy. Yeah, he would be a good person to have on, actually. That's a good idea. But Bodies in Panic, obviously you guys were in the mix with the New Jersey scene at that point. And eventually the band does become part of By Our Records. You mentioned Lenny, Lenny and Jim and Chris ran By Our Records. How did that connection come about? Was it just because you were playing shows with these guys and getting to know them? Was that really how the connection began with that scene?
Well, we never signed with Buyer Records. My connection to Buyer Records, mainly of those three guys, was Lenny. He
Mhm.
was the guy I spoke to the most. He was the most friendly to me. Chris was always very friendly, but I didn't see him around much. He was a quieter kind of guy,
Mm.
but also very nice. And Jim didn't speak much. I mean, Jim was around, and I mean, he spoke to other people, but just him and I never really spoke very much. And very cordial when we did speak. But our records, the story of our record, which is called "This Ain't Rock and Roll," then what the hell is it?
Mhm.
Uh, we put 13. We had 13 songs, and we wanted to go in the studio and put out a record at that time just to help let people know who we were. It was like introducing the band kind of record. It wasn't like, oh, we've been around a while now. We're doing all these shows, making money. Let's put out a record like the normal way people do it. we put it out like here's Bodies in Panic, listen to this and get to know us. And the money for the record was put up by me and Fred Buckholz, who was the guitar player at the time on the record. And Fred, I met him through my brother. My brother and him went to Votech together in Jersey, and Fred could fix and build anything. And my brother was a carpenter, so like the two of them were always buddies, like building stuff and fixing things. And one would teach the other stuff, and they're always curious like that. Like for years, I had a Rickenbacker bass that Fred sold me, and it was like how heavy a Rickenbacker bass is, the classic Rick. And he is so since it was so heavy, he shaved it down and made it light. It was just like about a third the size of what a regular Rickenbacker was. And a lot of people thought like he destroyed a great instrument, but I don't know. It sounded the same to me. And then he sold me Hagstrom. And if you're familiar with Hagstrom guitars, they're just pieces of plastic with a wooden neck, and they're very light. And so the back of it was plastic. The guitar he had that he eventually gave to me, he put velvet on the back, like this blue velvet, and so it would stick to your clothes, and then it stopped sliding all around. But he's just like always tinkering that way. He made a little amp, and he gave that to me, so I could play the guitar when, at home and not have to blast out the whole house. And with the Hagstrom too, the Hagstrom feeds back a lot. So with the little amp, it didn't feed back, so that was cool. But anyway, Fred and I did all the stuff with the record, and then we at the album covers we were in his basement, in his workshop, and we spray painted the covers, the red covers with black letters, Bodies in Panic on there with a stencil. And so we were really a homemade operation, like trying to do like the cheapest budget we could do. And so what we did was I went to Lenny and said, could we use the Buy a Record name to help put the record out there? So some distributors would take the record, like say we're from Buyer Records,
Hmm.
because their name was a little bit known by then. And he said, okay, he was cool about it. And we also, since it wasn't like 100% Buyer Records, we wanted to have our own name, and we called it Buyer Records slash Penguin Platters Productions. And that's the story of the record, pretty much.
Wasn't there a later pressing of that record without the spray painted cover?
No, no, like they all
Yeah.
we had more covers of the same. They were all spray painted. But what we did, we had like 25 records that were we spray painted silver, and so they were like blue vinyl kind of thing. There wasn't blue vinyl, but it's like that way. It's kind of made it more like a collector's item if you had the silver
Hmm.
letters instead of the black. And then I did inserts at my job. I worked at Pure Later Curry in the computer room, and I worked nights, so I was able to use the copying machine, and I made like these thousands of inserts with all like doodles from Gavin and I on it. Uh, it's just stupid stuff, and so those were in a lot of at least the first pressing, and the second pressing I don't think had those inserts.
I'm trying to think of the insert that I saw from the album where even then there's a list of former members on the inside sleeve. And that's the thing about Bodies in Panic is you guys went through a lot of different people in that band, right? I mean,
13 of them, yeah.
yeah.
13 songs on the record and 13 people in the band. Kind of a recurring number, but now three, I told you yesterday, two were passed away, but three, I forgot. I shouldn't have forgot. Ken Tarbus is the third, and he was from Catharsis, a band called Catharsis. And he was a good friend of mine. He was in Mensa, and he graduated from Columbia University. A brilliant guy, and he was like a guy that was always cracking jokes, like Don Rickles, real obnoxious, but you couldn't get mad at him, even if he was making fun of you, because he was so funny. And we went. There were seven of us in my station wagon. Went to Rock Against Reagan. It was Gavin, Greg, and Ken Tarbus, another guy named Ken, black guy named Ken. They were all mostly well, everybody's friends of mine going down there, but uh, so anyway, I kind of got lost in the middle of that story. But anyway, yeah, we went down to see that. And so what was I on talking about?
Well, just the fact that the lineup was always,
Oh, okay, yeah. So Ken Tarbus was there cracking jokes in the back of the car, like the station wagon, making fun of me the whole trip down from Jersey to Washington D.C. and everybody was laughing the whole time. But he had diabetes one, uh, and it's kind of from very early young age. He wasn't heavy, but he was 60 years old and he passed away. And then Seth Mandelbaum, he was a bike messenger and lived in Hell's Kitchen, New York City, and he just filled in for the tour in '85, the U.S. tour in '85. And who's the other one now? Now I lost the whole track of the other one.
well,
Uh,
Wayne, we lost.
Wayne. Okay, yeah, Wayne. Yeah, Wayne Russo. He was our drummer in Stetz, and we practiced a lot at Wayne's basement. That's where we wound up playing after Greg's basement. We went to Wayne's parents' house and practiced there. And Wayne's parents are the best. They're so nice. His father has passed away now. I think his mother's still alive, and his sister Lynn helps me once in a while, let me know what's going on. And uh, but kind of interesting after what happened to Wayne in 9/11. He was an accountant in New York City, and he was in the tower that had the antenna on the top of it. And so his parents, after Wayne died, because Stetz practiced there too, they made the basement like a museum to Wayne.
Mhm.
And you would think like that's kind of weird because uh, just like how do you take that? But it just seemed like it was right because like everything of Wayne is down there. Wayne had a zillion records. Wayne went to concerts all the time by himself with other people. But he just like if something he wanted to go see, he would just go see it. He loved Kiss. That was his favorite band. But he liked kind of like hard rock, I would say. Like he liked the fast music and he had a good sense of humor too. Uh, but yeah, it was real sad when he passed.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but he was the nicest guy. Like I never nobody ever saw Wayne get mad. He was just always like a positive guy, kind of quiet, but he was just like it's like the most unfair thing for that to happen to him. Yeah.
yeah. This,
So those are the three that passed away, and what they did in the band. But I told you the original lineup, and then we lost Gavin. He's still alive, but we lost him in the band when we went to play at City Gardens, and Gavin was 15, and Randy wouldn't let him come in because he was underage. At that time, they hadn't started the all ages shows, and it was a bar. City Gardens was a bar, and so we drove all the way down there for nothing. And Greg and Mike were really pissed. Uh, and so they said, well, Gavin's preventing us from doing shows. So, they said for me to tell Gavin, that he's not in the band anymore. And I didn't want to do it, but then I did it. And then Greg and Mike decided they didn't want to be in the band either. Uh, right after that, and there was like no bodies in panic. But then my brother said, like, what about this guy Fred? He plays guitar and he likes all kinds of music. He's got a good sense of humor, and he probably want to do it. And so I said, okay, I'll talk to him. And then I talked with Gavin. I said, do you want to start it up again? He said, we need a drummer. And we'll say, what about Wayne? Even though he's playing at Stetz, you think he would want to do it? And then he did. He said he'd do it. And so he played a lot of shows with us. And then we went on tour. Seth Mandelbaum went on the tour with us as a drummer with Gavin and Fred and myself. And Jennifer Lind drove. Uh, I don't know if you heard of her, Jennifer Lind.
No, I haven't.
All right. Well, she was the first wife of Paul Richard, and she died of cancer.
Oh, yeah,
But
never met her. Never met her.
yeah, she was friends with Margaret. Margaret was Dave Scott, the sportsman's girlfriend, and so they lived, I guess, in Englewood or like really far up North Jersey. Uh, but anyway, so they, I'm kind of getting, I sidetrack myself all the time here.
Well,
And
but she was driving, you said?
yeah, she drove like in the on the because Gavin didn't drive and Seth lived in New York City, didn't have a license, and it was just so Fred and I were like the only drivers. So she came just to drive. Plus AOD was out in California, so she drove with us out there, and then stayed in California with Paul, and then came and then hung out with him for several days while we because we played in L.A. and San Francisco, and then we met up with Jennifer again in L.A. and she drove back with us, so to helping with the driving. I probably did most of the driving, like 50%, then Fred 25 and Jennifer 25, or maybe Fred like, a little more than Jennifer. But one kind of interesting story where you were like coming up between Colorado and Utah or somewhere, and Jennifer was driving in the middle of the night, and I guess she was starting to zone out, and she didn't wasn't paying attention to the gas gauge and ran out of gas. And so, like, I was sleeping in the back. Fred had made like this platform, like two people could sleep at a time. And then there was like a bench seat in front of that and two seats in front. But so I was sleeping in the back. And then when the van ran out of gas, they said, well, what are we going to do? We're in the middle of nowhere, Route 80, I guess it was. And I said, well, I crossed over I put like a t-shirt over my head, a white t-shirt to help people see me and like cover my hair. And but anyway, I crossed over the highway and hitchhiked back to the next rest stop. And I guess the truckers are on the CB setting this crazy looking guy is hitchhiking on the highway. And a cop came up to the rest stop where I was getting gas in a gas can, which I had to pay a deposit for. But then the cop came up and said, "No, don't. He doesn't have to pay the deposit. I'll bring the can back for him," which was really cool. And then the cop drove me back to the van. But like Jennifer and Fred and Gavin, they all thought I was nuts for doing that.
Mm.
I probably was, but I did it.
How were the shows for you on that tour?
Well, they were pretty good. Like I'd say we started out we did like Anthrax and Catasauqua in Pennsylvania, Anthrax, Connecticut, Catasauqua, Pennsylvania, and then we did Columbus, Ohio, and then we went out to uh, Wisconsin, and then Minnesota, Minneapolis, um, and then we went to Kansas, and then we were supposed to do a show in Denver, but it got canceled. And then we went to San Francisco and played there with DRI. Um, yeah, I got a DRI story for you. The drummer for DRI was this little kid, and I'm about 6'5". So he came up to about my little above my waist. He was a little kid, and I was like helping everybody bring the stuff in from the van into the backstage area. So get ready. There were stuff there, and I put the records on top of one of our amplifiers, a box of records that we were going to sell at the show. And that's another reason why we made the records too, was to have them to be able to sell on tour. Uh, so uh, then I noticed this guy was taking the records and starting to hand them out to people. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "Well, he got all scared. He was like, thought I was going to hit him." but I didn't hit him. I just took the records back, and I said he told me he was the drummer from DRI. I didn't even know who he was, and I don't still to this day I don't know his name. But yeah, that was not too cool. But
Mm,
yeah,
mm. Yeah, I don't. I know they had this guy Felix in DRI, but I think that was a little later,
yeah,
like later in the 80s when they became more like a thrash band. Um,
yeah,
I'm more
but
familiar with those guys from that period of time.
yeah. But the rest of the rest of them seemed pretty cool. But he was about like I couldn't have been more than 14 or 15 years old. I said he must have been like about 4'11", 5 foot. He was a little guy.
Yeah, causing trouble.
Yeah, yeah. The little guys are always instigators.
Now, Bodies in Panic lasted a bit longer after that tour, right? Because I know
Yeah,
Greg had mentioned you'd put together a new band with some guys who weren't necessarily punk, but they were good players, right? Kind of like more
yeah. Well, yeah. What
rock.
happened was on tour, uh, I had spent by then uh, when I was working. Well, I was working at Pure still. I had spent like months like working on booking this show, and I was the one who booked all of our shows. And so during my breaks, I would just call all these people and talk to them and just find out, like, because we were on a budget, we were a low budget band, and we just wanted to do this to have fun. We were not in it to make money, and Bodies Panic was never about making money. It was just about having a good time and pretty much breaking even. And
Mm,
if we did that, we were happy. And so uh, we we'd go to these places, and so I had been talking to people who knew me, and so everything was friendly and cool, and like they would have parties for us, and like after the show or even before the show, let us stay at their house. We'd meet their families and their pets, and it was just a great time, and meeting all these nice people. But we'd get to a place, and we had to be at a show the next day, and the guys in the band and Jennifer are like, "Oh, these people are cool. Let's hang out with them." And no, we can't hang out. We've got to go and play the next show. And there's a bunch more people that are cool over there. But we got to go. And so like there was like a butting heads with them, like wanting to do that, and me wanting to go to the next show. And so as we kept going from place to place, the animosity grew, you know, more intense. And then by the time we got to California, it was pretty bad.
mm,
And so we did that show with DRI, and then we went in LA. We played that, and we were supposed to play a show in San Diego with like all these big bands. But then when I called the promoter, he said, "Well, I hadn't heard from you in a few weeks." I said, "Well, we're on tour. This in the 1980s, there was no cell phones. Uh, it was difficult. We didn't have a manager or anything. I did all that stuff." So, and as I'm playing in the band, I'm driving the van, I'm carrying equipment, and doing all that stuff, and and just keeping the band from killing each other. And so it's just like you can't be calling every promoter for each place just to make them feel better that yeah, I'm still coming, we're still coming. But so they had like 10 bands, and they said no, we crossed you out, we put somebody else in. And I said, well, we play for free. Just put us on the bill. And he said, no, there's just too many. They had a time limit. And so that kind of sucked. And by then we had shows in like New Mexico, Texas, I think Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and on the way back. But by then, like the band was like, the other people in the band were like, we're done. We don't want to play anymore. Just let's go home. And so then we kind of cut back through the country and stopped again in Ohio at the place where we played the show the first time on the way out there. And so I got back and I was kind of done with all of them, even Gavin. And Gavin was pretty cool throughout the trip. Like he didn't really take sides. He was just like, quiet young kid, like 15, 16. I guess he was about 16 by then. And he uh, was just into buying records. He didn't even eat. Like all he wanted to do is like anywhere we went, he wanted to go to the record store and buy records. And so like anytime he got a little money from a show, he would go spend it on records. And we'd say, Gavin, you got to eat, buy something to eat. And so like we felt bad, like one of us would give him a Gatorade or a peanut butter sandwich or something from our stuff. And but anyway, so like, but still, like I was pretty much just done with those guys. And then I had a friend named Bill Lawson. Uh, I can't even remember how we met, but I wound up being the best man at his wedding, at his first marriage. And I really don't talk much to him anymore, but he was bass player, and he knew me like from playing in bands, I guess. Boys and Panic playing out a lot, and so we got together and I heard him play, and I said, "Wow, you're really good." And he said, "Well, yeah, I said, your music's pretty funny. It's cool. But I don't play. I haven't played out much, and I want to play out." And said, "Let's get Buys and Panic back together." And he says, "I know this two guys, Chris Jensen and Mark Watson, who are going to school at Rider in Jersey, and they'd be interested in doing it." And so we got together, and Mark Mark can play any instrument, and he pretty much knows like any classic rock song. He could play any song like with any instrument, and he knows all the lyrics to every song. He's got a great memory. He's a really good songwriter, but only on his own. He doesn't collaborate. But so he fit in well, and then but Chris was a really good guitar player, still is, and these guys, they just wanted to play out. And they saw me playing out all this time and said, how are you getting all these gigs? And well, I said, I called the promoters and set up the shows. And so we play out all the time. And so that's what I did with them. And I listened to your interview with Greg, and he was saying like those guys just listen to a certain amount of, certain types of music, like Roxy music or Rush or whatever, and they did, but they listened to other stuff too, and they liked the punk music, the hardcore music, because they liked playing it. It was fun to them playing fast, and so I think Greg was a little hard on those guys, but they're just great musicians. So when we played out, then we sounded more like a professional band than like uh, the original Buys and Panic was always kind of goofy and funny, and but like even that band, like the original Buys and Panic, we tried to get to the point where we would first go on stage and we would play like 8, 9 songs in a row without stopping, with no breaks in between, because a lot of bands that play a song and then they'd be jerking around, for a minute or two between songs. And we,
Misfits.
yeah, we so didn't want to do that. We just wanted to keep cranking out the songs. And so we always had like a somewhat of a bit of professionalism that way. But if you listen to the songs, like our songs are goofy, and they were meant to be goofy, but they're covered like all topics, and like the idea, I guess, was to be outrageous, like Howard Stern kind of outrageous, maybe even beyond, and just to be funny and not make any sense really, and just have fun, and that's what we did. But anyway, I'm talking and you're not getting a chance, so go ahead.
Well, so you did that sort of version of the band for a while. When and why did Bodies in Panic eventually, wind down, no matter who was in the band at that point? It kind of just stopped being.
Okay, so after we played out a bunch with Chris and Mark and Bill Lawson, Chris Jensen, Mark Watson, and me. And so uh, Bill stayed with it, um, and then Chris, he's dropped out. Like after we had a show at CB's with Government Issue, and he couldn't make it for some reason. And so like after that, like he dropped out of the band, or we were very unhappy with him. We're standing outside CBGB's waiting for him to show up, and he never showed up. And we found out later. But So that was not good. But uh, then we got a guy named Jeff Webb to play guitar, and Jeff is he's on Apple and Spotify and all that stuff under his name Jeff S. Webb, and he puts out a lot of his own music, and it's all different kinds of stuff too. And he is a great guitar player, and so he was in the band, and we became really good friends. And he plays softball, and I did too. I ran the Burnsville softball league for like 10 years,
Hmm.
and so I played in that league. And so Jeff joined that league with me. And then he was in the league at Hillsborough. And so I went down there and played with his team a bunch of times. And then, we'd be rehearsing and playing gigs all the time. So what happened after we put out like this 4 song, I guess cassette, it was when cassettes were out, it's like 86. And then, we rehearsed there too, where we recorded. It's like I think it's called Apple Studios in Raritan, New Jersey, off the Circle near Somerville. Uh, and so we were at the end of the practice, and Jeff says, "My wife says I'm not home enough. I have to quit the band."
Mhm.
And by that time, we had a guy named Jim Cavanaugh playing drums. The reason why Mark Watson dropped out of the band is because his mom told him he couldn't play punk rock music anymore. And he was like a 19-year-old young man, and so he had to quit. And so it's like there's always a story why it's people come in and out of the band, but uh, so uh, so Jim and Bill and I with Jeff Webb were there, and Jeff saying, "Well, I have to quit the band because my wife's on my case." And the sad part is too, like not too much longer after that, they got divorced. So, but by then the band is already toast. Um, but anyway, so when Jeff quit, I just felt like this guy's like the best guitarist I'd ever heard, and we're not going to get anybody better than him. It's just like I just didn't want to get any old buddy to take his place because I kind of got used to hearing him play. And so I just said I'm done too, and that was the end of it.
Hmm.
Because I really was like the driving force in Bodies and Panic. I kind of made sure it survived, I guess. Um, it's like it started out with Gavin, but I guess I took over. Yeah.
Now, where did you go from there musically? Did you end up taking some time off or getting involved with other things at that point?
Well, from like 86 to 88, um, Jeff and Mark and I, uh, not so much with Bill, like he was around, but like it was mainly Jeff and I, where he was doing like the 4-track reel to reels, and we recorded a bunch of songs. And that's what Greg said, like those guys didn't have sense of humor. Like we recorded songs like Your Personality is a Virgin, like original song. Uh, I'm a fan of Kinski, like goofball songs, like Boz and Peg type songs, but just like more solid musically, like more depth to the sound, and just you know, still like the same goofiness of Boz and Panic, I think, and it fit in. And then we did a cover of Hocus Pocus by Focus, and instead of doing like the parts, I would sing like Bodies in Panic, like that, and then a few other things we put in there. But we had like Jeff's guitar playing, and he played bass on that too, and then got Mark to play drums, and it sounded great. So we were doing stuff like that, and we played out 1 or 2 shows till like up till about 88. And
Hmm.
I met my wife in 86. And then we got married in 88. And so that's kind of about when my life took a new direction with having kids, because we had our first kid in 1990. We have 4 children. Been married 37 years now.
That's great.
Yeah. So 3 grandchildren. Yeah. I don't get to see him too much, but that kind of stinks. But the kids are spread out. I got my oldest son's a King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. He's an auto mechanic. And then my middle boy, he lives in Claremont, Florida, still, and he lives with a girlfriend. And my oldest son has two kids with his wife, and my middle boy with his girlfriend has a daughter. And so I have those three grandchildren. So one's in Florida, and two are in Pennsylvania. So I haven't seen them in a while, but hopefully soon.
Now you and Chris have done music together in more recent years, right?
Yeah, well, I think been on your podcast before about the 2014 reunion show
Mhm.
with Bison Paddock and Pleased Youth. Well, Pleased Youth was the headliner. Uh, that was the first time Pleased Youth played a headline above us. Every time we ever played with them before, back in the day, we were the headliners, or and they played like before us. And it's kind of an interesting story. Um, yeah, Paul Decolator and I had kind of a hate like relationship. So I
Oh,
can't say love. We never like it wasn't like that friendly, but uh, he was a weird guy that would always be looking for an angle, and he was a troublemaker, and so like he would always try and like tease me and get on my nerves. But at the same time, he liked hanging out with me, and him and Greg Licht and I we hung out quite a bit. I don't know if you know Greg Licht from Feudal Effort.
I know of him. We've never met.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy. I'm not sure what he's doing now, but he's a pretty bright guy. Uh, but anyway, I think he enjoyed just like he wanted to see what Paul did next. I think like he just wanted to be around for that. But anyway, so Declator was always trying to like he'd come up to me, the shows we are playing together, and say, "Oh, we have to be somewhere after, or there's this reason or that reason that we need to play like after you guys." And I'm like, "Sorry, Paul, no go. Where you played before, and
Mhm.
that's it." And then so finally they headlined over us, and they're really good. Like they were rehearsing a lot before the show, 2014, and we just had like two practices after I came up from Florida, and those the other three guys, Chris, um, Gavin, and Mark, were rehearsing a few times without me before I got up there. But uh, Pleased Youth was very polished, and then there was Bedlam, which with it was like a Bedlam, Tommy, and Paul Richard and Jack. So
Right.
it wasn't even really Bedlam, but they were playing Bedlam songs. And then Mental Decay and Cyanamid. So there are five bands altogether. Um, and it was a pretty good show. There were a lot of people there. It was nice to see all the people back. But after that show in 2014, Chris and I started talking more again, and we realized that we were pretty good friends. It's just like I guess like a rekindling of the friendship that kind of died out after that government issue show. And then we started writing songs together. And so, like from 2015 through now, we started a band called Yol Bolson, Yolbolson, which means "May there be roads," and that's in Turkish. Uh, so it's like kind of merchants back in the day, like in the 1100s in Europe, when they passage, they would go from town to town to sell their stuff, and there'd be whole big caravans because they'd have to. They have to have security because people would rob them if they didn't. But anyway, so like these caravans would run into each other, going from one town to the next, and then whatever they did, it would be years apart from they see each other, and they would say like, let's get together, let's eat and party and all that. And then when they'd leave, instead of saying "see you later" or something like that, they'd say "Yol Bolson." And so I like the idea that we're older now, so that may there still be roads, and so Yol Bolson. And we have a bunch of songs that we've written, originals, and we did a cover of "Hurt" by Trent Reznor, uh, and that was also done by Johnny Cash.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you know the story about that. After Trent Reznor heard Johnny Cash do the song "Hurt," he said, "It's not my song anymore. It belongs to Johnny Cash."
Right.
And I agreed with that because it just what Johnny Cash did with it was just so powerful, and he did it right before he died. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, that's on there, and then we have three songs on YouTube. We had a couple songs that were on Apple and Spotify for a while, but they expired after 5 years. So he's going to put those two back up on YouTube. Um, and so we'll have five songs, and then probably this summer we're going to record some more. We have three three songs that we want to do, and then redo the Yol Bolson song that we had recorded before, but we need to redo it. So there'll be nine songs altogether, I guess, probably by this fall sometime up on YouTube.
Great, great. And I'll
But
look into the stuff that's on YouTube now, and I'll include links in the video description for
yeah,
this podcast when I post it.
all
So,
right, yeah, like the Yol Bolson is under Christopher X24 Jensen. And those three songs that are on there, Hurt, Slave to the Grave, and Live,
hmm.
are the three songs that are on there. Two originals and the one cover. And then Bodies and Panic stuff is all, there's tons of stuff from Bodies and Panic on YouTube as well. So,
Excellent. Yeah, I posted some of that when I put up the Greg interview for Bodies in Panic. I'll make sure it's included in this one as well, just for people who haven't heard that stuff, because it
yeah,
definitely falls into the history that I've been looking to chronicle. And it's a great record. I love that record. So,
yeah,
it's cool for people to check it out. They haven't. One person I wanted to mention who comes up quite a bit, just because of how, frankly, how critical he was, not only for your generation of New Jersey bands, but my generation, which came after you guys. We gotta give props to Pat Duncan at WFMU.
yeah.
The fact that he was really so ground floor for this. I'd imagine that you were pretty tuned in with what Pat was doing on those Thursday nights.
Oh, yeah. I listened to his show whenever I could. Uh, didn't listen every Thursday, but he let us play. Bodies and Panic played live in the studio. He was doing a lot of live shows back then. Uh, and I think Tommy might have been there helping. Like he would help him with the sound, with the live bands. Tommy Kaprowski.
Yeah, F you, Tommy.
Don't say that. He's such a good guy.
He'd say that. He'll believe it.
Yeah, well, he should. He's a good guy. I
Yeah,
like.
he is. He is. He knows. He knows.
Yeah, I got nothing bad to say about the man.
Hey, look, I would say 40% of the people who've been on this channel are because of Tommy Kaprowski. So uh,
Yeah,
he's my artist liaison
yeah.
for New Jersey interview. So we love you, Tommy. Even though we don't, we still love you.
All that anger he's got, like on Facebook, it's all a front. He's just a nice guy.
Yeah, yeah. I can cut this out if you want me to, Tommy, after I post it. We don't want to break we don't want to break the best kept secret in New
Yeah,
Jersey. You're actually a sweetheart. So,
yeah,
but anyway, yeah. So yeah, I know Tommy was doing sound for Pat's show back then because he would rehearse with Bedlam and then cruise up to FMU,
yeah,
do that. So
yeah.
um, and I had a lot of fun times playing at Pat's show myself. I think I played there 8 or 9 times on
Oh,
Pat
really? Okay.
in a few different bands. I think I played there with like 5 different bands. One of which was with Ron Knoll, actually.
Yeah. Was that the Parasites?
Yeah, yeah, that was kind of like a later Parasites thing where Ron, myself, and Anthony Rodriguez
Yeah.
playing with Ron forever. We did pretty much the first Parasites record, Pair of Sides.
Uh-huh.
This would have been probably 98.
Yeah.
Yes. And then like a week later, I played there with the Undead because I was playing with Bobby Steele for a bunch of years.
Yeah.
So, and then I had my other band, the Graveyard School. We played around the same time. So I was always going up to FMU to play. And Pat was great. There'd be like 4 bands in one night. We'd block everybody's cars outside the house, and then we'd always have to move
Yeah.
cars at least 3 times during the
Yeah.
night. Yeah, and you would play in the living room, remember? There's like the living room in the house.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was a trip. Oh,
yeah,
always loved
yeah,
that.
yeah. But Ron Knoll and Andy S. from Pleased Youth. Like when I went to their reunion, so Ron came to watch the show. He had a gig that night, but then he came and watched us. We were like, I guess we were the fourth band. He had to leave before Pleased Youth. He wanted to stay, but he had his own show. But anyway, him and Andy, I noticed like in 2014, like all these people had changed. They got older, me too. But Ron and Andy, they look the same.
Oh,
It's like they never aged.
well, Andy, I'm convinced Andy's actually aging in reverse. I think the next time I see Andy, he's going to be 18 again because I've
Yeah,
never seen somebody actually age retroactively before.
yeah, but Ron looks the same too to me.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. I saw Ron, I guess it would have been like 2 years ago. I was down in Jersey at Chiller Theater and the Accelerators had a table.
Yeah,
You're right, man. It doesn't matter if it was 1998 or 2022, whatever it was, he's exactly the same, you know.
yeah,
I got to get him on here, actually.
yeah,
I got to see if he'll come on.
yeah.
Uh,
I could tell you about some of the shows I saw in LA if you want to hear about them.
yeah, for sure. For sure.
Okay, well, like some of the shows I really remember, like from the whiskey, when they went to see the Dead Kennedys, that was very intense. Like the mosh pit was super intense. The Dead Kennedys were great. The whiskey has two floors, and on the first floor is stage, like about rib high to me, so maybe like about 4 foot high or something, and it's a pretty small stage, not tiny, bigger than a lot bigger than the court, like twice as big as a court, but for that size venue, which probably holds I don't know close to 1,000, I guess, with if there are people on top and below, and then upstairs they have like a pool table and you could sit and eat and stuff. But after I saw them there, I saw the plasmatics there,
Mm,
and that was unbelievable. Wendy O, she was so like the greatest showman ever,
yeah.
showwoman, I guess. But Rich Stotts, I guess, guitar. He had like a tutu on with he had a bright blue mohawk. And
Yep.
Wendy at the time had blonde hair with a little bit of pink in it, so she hadn't done like the mohawk stuff or any of that stuff yet. And so she looked good, and she came out with like this black bodysuit that went just above her breasts, and then like after a few minutes it was like below below her breasts, and she just had the electrical tape on covering the nipples, and then she changed like halfway through the set, she changed into this like schoolgirl outfit, and she started like cutting up a guitar with a chainsaw and like smashing all these potted plants, and it's like squirting shaving cream all around, and it was just like and the band was like they had a bass player, black guy with a white mohawk named
Yeah.
Pierre, I guess his name was.
Jean
Yeah,
Beauvoir. Jean
yeah.
Beauvoir.
Okay, yeah. So he had a white mohawk and he would wear uh, black sunglasses, wrap around black sunglasses. He would stand up on the rise right next to the drummer. And then the guy Wes, I think, is the other guitar player.
Yeah, West Beach.
Yeah, and so he was in a black tuxedo with like a gray, white, spiky hair and like eye black under his eyes, like football players or baseball player would wear to block the sun. But they just were so. The music was great, and just with her and doing the stuff in front. And this is like, I was right up next to the stage. I took a lot of pictures um, that I had, I guess, till I went blind about 9 years ago. I've lost all that stuff now because I just like I don't really care about like material stuff anymore. But anyway, so she did that show, and then I saw a band called the Alley Cats. Have you heard of them?
I love the Alley Cats. Love them.
I'm super low at the Alley. I saw them like 3 times. I saw them twice at the Whiskey, and then at this little place in Brea, California. And that was like the stage like was about 6 inches high, And what I think about the Alley Cats, though, I think like Diane, the bass player, singer, she sort of sang all the songs. The
Yeah.
guitar player is a guy named Randy, I think.
Yeah, Randy Stadola. We're Facebook friends actually.
Yeah, but like Randy, he's a good guitar player, but like his voice is okay. But like she kind of like if they had like dressed her up like more like I guess like sexy or whatever you want to call it, or just more glamorous, and let her do like say 80% of the songs instead of half of the songs,
Mhm.
I think they would have got made it bigger than they did. But their music is rock and their drum player is great.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
They were probably one of my favorite LA bands. I lived out there for a bit, much later. This is like 20 years ago I was out there.
yeah,
But you hear like all the legends about the bands, and I got to be good friends with this guy named Brendan Mullen. He used to book a place called The Mask back then.
yeah,
All those bands kind of came through that era. But of all those bands, I'd have to say my favorites were um, definitely the Germs. But the Alley Cats were definitely up there.
yeah,
She's fantastic, and she's kind of vanished. Like no one,
yeah,
I mean, there's actually a version of the Alley Cats still playing today with Randy, and he's got a young lady, playing bass and singing. But Diane was fantastic.
yeah, yeah. She was really good at that show in Brea. I just went past her like and I said, "You guys are great," and she said, "Thank you." That was the extent of the conversation, but yeah, they were. I really liked them, and you know the song "Black Haired Girl."
Mm.
There's not a month goes by that I don't listen to that song still. So
Yeah, I got a great compilation of theirs. I don't even know if it's official or not, but it's all the studio recordings of
yeah,
Alley Cats. And then they changed their name in the 80s. They became a band called the Zarkons.
yeah.
Same people, they just changed their name for
Oh,
some reason.
real?
I found that record. I was out right before the pandemic. I was out in Palm Springs, California for work.
Yeah,
Record store, and they had the Zarkons record. This is like 83, 84. Um, but that's good stuff too. I mean, what a
yeah,
great band that not many people know about, and
yeah.
definitely
But
worth.
that's why I mentioned them right away because they were like listening wise to me and live like they weren't like great showmen or anything. They were just like a solid rock band,
Yeah.
but they were good. Like like when I went to see them, I remembered the music and it stuck with me. But other bands I saw, like I saw the Go Go's at the Whiskey, and like I don't know if it was told you yesterday or today that there was like one of the most intense mosh pits I ever saw was for the Go Go's,
Mm,
and their sound before the record was great. But then also I saw like Nina Hagen there,
mm,
and then I saw X at the Roxy, and my cousin John, who had me listen to the Dead Kennedys "Holiday in Cambodia" song, he went with me to see X. And in the line, we had tickets already, so we were able to go up to the front. There was a long line waiting to get in, and in the line was Bill Murray and Lorraine Newman.
mm.
And Bill Murray was signing some girl's face, like autographing her face. So that was pretty funny. But X was really good that night, and the place was packed.
Yeah.
And then at the Starwood, I saw Fear, and Lee Ving was playing. He didn't have a shirt on, and back then, like people were like to spit on people, like it was a really gross thing. But like, or like when people were playing, like people would spit at them. And so like Lee Vang's playing, and he's got like this all this spit like going like from one end of his shoulders like down or over his chest like to the other shoulder, and it's just like running down his chest like I never saw like so much spit like that on any anywhere
Mm,
saliva, and but it's just like that was like what was happening back then, like just weird stuff like that.
yeah.
Yeah, and then another time I went to see the Plasmatics, the Santa Monica Civic Center. And at that place, they have seats all the way in the back that go almost straight up, like a football stadium or something like that, like just a unlike a theater where they have, you've probably seen before where seats go like on a really steep angle
Right.
back, but like the floor itself was on an angle. And then there was a little bit of flat space right in front of the stage. But they built a barrier because I guess like the plasmatics were worried people were going to jump on stage or whatever. But they built a barrier. All these bouncers, like from Santa Monica, like Muscle Beach, like all these guys were there with their sleeves rolled up and like just huge guys, muscle bound guys. And they were in this little pit area between the stage and the barrier. And so this at this show, Wendy blew up a car because the stage was big enough to do it. But anyway, so what was happening since the floor was slanted down and they had removed the seats, like I guess other times there were seats there, but they removed these seats. So all these people were standing there on an angle. And so like if you were on this flat area in front of the barrier, like those people were pressing down against you. And I was right in front against the barrier. And it was just like to the top of my ribs high. So like a lot of people, it was like, just their face was above the barrier if they were right up in front. And so they were getting, they couldn't breathe because it was really hot. And like I was having trouble breathing even. So like when what would happen is like the people would climb up over the barrier just to survive because they couldn't take it anymore. And these bouncers would just beat the crap out of the people once they came over. And then they'd run them down the line. Like one guy would punch him, the next guy would punch him, the next guy. It was really horrible. And then like I was let's say about halfway through the set, I couldn't take it anymore. And so I just went like Bruce Banner into Hulk and I turned around and I just started like I went back like doing like swimming in my arms, and I went back through like like all these people that were in the mosh pit and then beyond the mosh pit, and so I got towards like to the back of the last part of the pit, and I could see like a little opening, and I was going for the opening to get out of there just so I could breathe. And some person, it must have been a guy, I never saw him, but he locked onto my wrist and like I tried to like twist my wrist and get away from him, but he had like a vice grip on my wrist, and I couldn't. And I said, I'm not going back into that thing. Like I just worked my way through that for like took me like more than 5 minutes to work through that. And so like I just turned and threw a punch, like, and I know I hit the guy's head. I didn't even see it land, but you could feel it. And he still held my arm. Like I thought, like this guy's not going to go. But then, like about 3 seconds, 4 seconds after it landed, he let go. And so it must have been like delayed reaction because I really hit him hard. And then I just went to the back of the uh, area where the seats go up real high, and I just sat back there and watched the rest of the show. But that was very intense.
Mm.
But like seeing those people get beaten up like that, I had never seen anything like that, and it's just uh, it's kind of like it was a big turnoff for that show. Um, and I guess that was probably the more like the most memorable things I could think about California. I never saw Black Flag, but there were always a lot of like the spray painted symbols, like the Black Flag logo,
Yeah.
all around, and they were playing all over the place. And I heard their music on K Rock. Um, so I knew they were, and I never saw the germs. I think the germs might have been kind of done by then, because Darby was getting into a lot of drugs and all kinds of stuff. But so I never saw them, but I did. A movie came out while I was out there, Decline of Western Civilization, which I'm sure you saw.
Sure.
Yeah, and so that was about that era too. But so I think that he was kind of like, I got out there in '79, so he was kind of, I guess, before that maybe. I'm not positive about that, but anyway, then I guess like shows in New York that I remember. I saw Tina Turner at the Ritz. I saw X at the Ritz. I saw the Plasmatics at the Ritz,
Mm.
the old Ritz, and I saw Susie and the Banshees at the old Peppermint Lounge, the Butthole Surfers. I saw there. Susie and the Banshees was great, by the way.
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
really liked them.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and But the most intense mosh pit I ever saw was CBGB's Agnostic Front. And so, like, I'd say, like, probably about 10, 15 of us from the Jersey scene were on the side of the stage at CB's, uh, like where it goes back into the hallway toward the bathroom.
Sure.
So we're right on the side of the stage, and Agnostic Front's playing, and it just seemed like something from medieval times, like just the energy, and uh, it just was an atmosphere that was hard to explain, but it was electric. And the people were so into it. And the slam, like the way people slam into each other, was so vicious. But yet, if somebody got knocked down, they'd stop and pick them up.
Hmm.
It's like so they didn't want to hurt anybody, but just the energy of the music and the people watching. And it was just like all of us from New Jersey were just like with our mouths hanging open watching this. Just like couldn't believe it. So that was a very memorable show. And then when you had Sid Sludge on, you had brought up a guy named Billy Psycho.
Yep.
Okay, so around that time, I was dating a woman, black woman named Bon Harris. And I don't know if you know her. She was just around a little while. But anyway, she went to San Francisco. And I never heard from her again. Uh, and I only went out with her a couple times. But so we were at the CB's watching a matinee show, and it was mostly New York bands, no big bands, like just the regular bands. But there was a good mosh pit going, and so we were going to leave, and so we were on the side of the stage, we walking out, like past the mosh pit, like toward the edge of it, and Billy Psycho was in the mosh pit, and he came out and he slammed into Bon, like really hard, and she was about like 5'3". And I think Billy's not even 6 foot. He's not a huge guy, but he's like stocky, and plus he has that crazy look in his eye that makes him more intimidating. But anyway, he slammed into her hard, and Bond was pretty tough though. Like she didn't fall, but she shoved him hard back, and then like Billy Psycho like put up his arm like he was going to punch her, but then he saw it was a girl, a woman, and he see like he was like, oh, so he didn't hit her. But I was thinking like while he put his arm up to hit her, I was thinking, uh-oh, I'm gonna have a fight with Billy Psycho in a mosh pit with a bunch of skinheads, and that was a scary moment.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can imagine. I can imagine.
yeah, but my heart dropped. I was like, if he hits her, I'm gonna hit her back. I'm gonna hit him back,
Yeah.
and then like all hell's gonna break loose.
Yeah. Well, it's a good thing he thought better of it.
Yeah,
There are certain things, there are certain lines you don't cross, even if you're Billy Psycho. You know,
yeah,
there are certain lines you don't cross. I think a lot of this stuff needs to be preserved. I mean, a lot of it's online now too. Like you can listen to Bodies in Panic on YouTube, which is fantastic.
yeah. There's a lot of stuff up there. Yeah,
And again, I think it's important to document as much of this stuff as possible. I'm always interested in it because you guys were the generation before mine. So the best I could have done back then was read about you. I couldn't get to see the shows or anything. So it's been great doing this particular series of interviews because I get to
yeah,
connect with people. And what's really cool is a lot of people are still around. A lot of people are still doing music in some way. Uh,
yeah,
I mean, like, well, Andy from Pleased Youth, he's gonna be playing forever, I'm sure.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so
Place a lot of. Hey, Joel. Like people want to listen to like your older interviews. Like I was just happened to come across like when you put out the Kaprosky and the Sludge and the Greg Walker interviews, and then I clicked the link. But like your older interviews, like how would you listen to those if you wanted to? Like, I guess you interviewed Paul and
mhm.
Jack from AOD and Dave from AOD.
Yeah, everything's up there. It's pretty easy if you go. I mean, I don't know how the look of it is on your phone versus the computer. I'm more of
Well, I don't have a computer and I can't see my phone, so.
um,
We didn't discuss this, but I am blind for 9 years now. So
everything is up there still. Basically, when you go to my YouTube channel page.
Okay.
There will be options, one of which is just it just says videos. If you click on
Yeah.
that, it'll have everything going back. I started doing this October of 2023. So there's about 175 interviews up there currently.
So you just search Joel Gausten videos?
Yeah, well, it's under the name Glory is Noise TV.
Okay.
Uh,
Glorious Noise TV. All
yeah,
right.
I'll send that to you as well. But
All right.
yeah, it's not just Jersey stuff. I just had Stan Lynch from Tom Petty's band on.
Yeah.
So it's different artists, but I've had this recurring thread of New Jersey people. Every like third or fourth video will be a New Jersey centric person.
Yeah.
That's where I came up. And if people are still around and are still happy to talk, I want to have them on.
Yeah.
And it's been cool for me because I've reconnected with people I knew when I was coming up, um, and people whose records I really enjoyed as well. AOD was a big one for me, when I was, 10, 11, 12 years old, learning about this stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so having all those guys on was great.
I have
Um,
a question for you, Joel.
yeah,
When you listen to AOD, the guitar sound, does it sound like bees swarming?
sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, they get like they a lot of songs they get that sound. It just sounds like a bunch of bees, just like zzz, and it's really cool. I like it.
Yeah, my thing with AOD, it kind of changes depending on my mood at that time. Like there's some days I'll put on Humongous Fungus Among Us, which is
Yeah,
the fastest record they'll ever do. And then I'll get tired of that, like the fast, and then I'll put on like Ishtar or the Elvis record with
yeah,
the more mid-tempo stuff. I thought they did both sounds very well.
yeah. Oh yeah, they could play anything. Like my favorite song by them is the Masterpiece Theater, like the Beethoven Ode to Joy. They did so. Yeah,
And the fact that they can still play that speed, at the ages they're at now is pretty stunning. Dave Scott still sounds great. Um, you
yeah. I
know,
guess Bruce has arthritis and can't do it anymore.
yeah, yeah. So they've got Keith right now,
Yeah,
doing that part. They had Jim Foster for a while. He was with them last year when I saw him.
yeah,
I guess
yeah.
Keith
The
back.
first show I ever saw with AOD was at Irving Plaza with Jim Foster, and then every other show after that was with Bruce. Uh, Bruce and Jack and Paul and Dave. And I must have saw him about 50 times, I guess,
Hmm.
back in the day.
Yeah, they were definitely the high water mark of all that stuff.
Yeah,
Uh,
we probably played out with them about 15 times or so, I'd say, at
mm,
different places. Yeah, I got a one good story with AOD. It was like in Baltimore. So we went down there. Scream was the headliner, and it was AOD and Bodies in Panic.
mhm.
And so it was just like this place was like this rundown place. I don't even know. It was like what do they call it? Like when it's should be closed. Um,
Like a squat.
yeah, kind of. Yeah, I would say that'd be a good description. But so Wayne was in the band then, and so he was in college and he was studying his accounting stuff. He had it set up like we were supposed to do a sound check and we were waiting for the guy to get ready. And he's studying his books on the drums. Uh, and uh, there's a big crowd. The place was packed. And so we did about 5 or 6 songs. And the police came and they came up on stage and the cop, he put his hand out to take the microphone from me. They gave it to him and he said, like, everybody's got to go. So like AOD and Scream never got to play. That happened to Baltimore. But we played several times in Baltimore and other places. And there was always great, scene down there. And we had great shows, a lot of people, a lot of energy. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was and that was another one where Ken Tarbus went with us and he videotaped the whole the videotaped us in the van and and so like at the show and way back and put in all those typical Ken Tarbus comments. crack everybody up. But yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting how far-reaching all this has become. You know, just what we'll call hardcore from the 80s, still has such at this point an international following.
yeah,
The fact that AOD is overseas playing shows is
yeah,
remarkable, Ben. That's,
yeah,
this is 45 years ago. Um, that's amazing. And of course, Agnostic Front and a lot of the New York people are still, Murphy's Law still plays, Agnostic Front still plays.
yeah,
Agnostic Front tours like, you know, I look at their tour itineraries and I'm like, how are you guys pulling this off?
yeah,
We're going out 30, 40 dates at a clip, and
yeah,
but Roger used to always say it was a way of life and he meant it,
yeah.
you're still
Yeah.
at it.
Well,
It's
the band that's really like just keeps playing and playing is the Accelerators.
yeah,
They don't stop.
yeah.
I got to get up there somehow. It's like it's not easy for me to get around now with like, not being able to drive. My wife sold our car that we had in Florida, so she doesn't drive anymore. So for us to be have to take the bus like to probably like Wilmington and then take a train
Mm.
somewhere like up into Jersey, maybe hook up with Greg Walker and we'll go together. I guess we've talked about that going to see the Accelerators. But yeah,
Yeah.
they're just like they're putting out new music and they playing shows like uh, just like how Bodies and Panic used to play out like 4 or 5 times a month. But they'll play anywhere. So, but that's I guess I think they just enjoy it. Like Ron enjoys, he must.
Yeah,
That's
well, the guy's a songwriting machine
yeah,
too. He can put together a tune, and there's
yeah,
stuff that he's written away from what you would say is like punk rock, like more not even so much commercial, but more pop leaning type stuff
yeah.
that he's played me over the years. It's amazing.
Yeah, he sends me different songs that he's done. And asks me to tell him what I think of it, and most of it I like a lot.
Yeah, yeah, he's and a good singer too. He's got a good voice.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, melodic.
I've always supported Ronnie's stuff. Ronnie and I, we did that Parasites thing on FMU on Pat's show. And
Yeah,
a couple years later, I can't remember what happened. This is a while ago, but he had a gig and not all the accelerators could make it. So he put together another band called the Modulators just for one night. And it
yeah,
was him, Brian from Stetz,
yeah,
me on drums, and I think Anthony Rodriguez was part of
yeah,
that. But
yeah,
just one show, like for whatever reason, he didn't want to call it the Accelerator. So we did that. And that's the only time I ever really met Brian Sommer was we rehearsed, I think, twice, and then we did
yeah,
the show. And this had to have been 25 years ago at least.
yeah. But we didn't get into any of the Stetz stuff,
Hmm.
and I was in Stetz for a little while. You want to hear about that?
Were you singing with Stats? Is that what?
Yes, I sang, and so like at this time, I was in Bodies and Panic. I never quit Bodies and Panic, but Bodies and Panic was playing out like a lot, like I told you, and so Brian and Wayne like they wanted to play out more because Stetz was kept rehearsing in Wayne's basement, but hardly ever played out, and they didn't know how to get gigs, and so they well, Brian talked to me and he said, like, how are you getting all these gigs? And I said, well, I find out who the promoter is and you call them and you tell them who you are and what, you want to play at their venue. And, so like Brian said, well, would you want to sing with us and help us get some gigs? And so I said, sure, I'll do that. And because I like Stetz and I was friends with Wayne. And so I joined them and we practiced in his basement. Frank, the bass Frank Merringer, he would never show up for practice. He would just show up for the gigs. So it would just be like Brian, Wayne, and I in this basement practicing the songs. And then we played out the Dirt Club. We did Anthrax, Connecticut, and a couple other places. And so like I'm starting to book these shows for Stetz. And Brian got all freaked out. He used to saying, like you're booking too many shows. We can't handle it. And so like he wanted to be able to for me to call like the promoter, arrange for a show, and then come back to Brian and see if it's okay. And I don't know if you've ever booked shows before, but it doesn't work like that. Like when you call, you got to arrange the show, and that's it. The promoter doesn't want to hear from you again until it's time to go, time to play, and they want you to show up. And that's, but so I kept trying to explain it to Brian, but he's like, oh, so eventually I left Stetz, and I remained friends with them for a long time. Uh, and Brian, I guess. Well, Wayne, no, I was always friends right till he died. But another interesting story, like kind of Stetz related, was when Greg got married. So this is before 9/11, not maybe a couple of years or a year before that. I can't remember the year that Greg got married, but Wayne and I were both ushers in Greg's wedding, and we both had tuxedos, like these white, like kind of like beige, not beige, like cream colored tuxedos. And uh, so a guy named Ted, I think you mentioned him with
Sure.
Greg, his interview.
Yes.
Ted, I forget his last name, but he probably the band
Like,
called Flatus or something.
yeah, well, he calls himself Ted Flatus, but his
Yeah,
name is Ted Shiko. He's from my old neighborhood in New Jersey.
yeah. So like he was playing out that night of Greg's wedding. And so Wayne and I were talking at the wedding. He said, "Well, what are you doing after the wedding?" He said, "You want to go see this band, this guy that's playing at Stetz now with us, playing bass." Because by then Frank was out of the band. And so I said, "All right, sounds good." And so like Wayne and I, like he drove. I was living in Florida by then, so I didn't have a car, and Greg had drove me and even to the wedding. But anyway, so Wayne and I drove to the show. I think it was in Clifton, and so we're there in tuxedos. We're at the edge of the mosh pit, like pushing people back in to the pit. Like gently push them back into to keep them in their circle. But yeah, so like that was pretty funny. But like on the way to the show, like I had no cash on me, and by even then, I just used debit cards. I never had cash. Just becoming obsolete. But anyway, so I said to Wayne, let's stop at an ATM so I could get money for the show. And Wayne said, "What do you want the money for?" I said, I just want to pay for entrance to the show." He's like, "No." And I mean, what do you mean no? He says, "I'm paying for you." He says, he would, I didn't want him to. It was only $5, but still, like that's how Wayne was. Like he just wanted to take care of his friends all the time. And then after the show, Wayne and I drove back and we parked like in front of his house in Union. And because he lived with his mom right up to the end, his mother and father. But so we were just talking for like an hour about this and that, and him and Brian were going to plan to drive down to Florida to see me, and like we'd go three of us go do some stuff, uh, and then that's not long after that. That's when 9/11 happened, and that was the last time I ever saw Wayne. Uh, but the one other thing interesting related to Stetz is that, but when my son, my oldest son was 18, about 18, maybe 16, between 16 and 18, and he was going to get his first car from his aunt who lived in Princeton, New Jersey. And we took the train up to the Amtrak train, and then his aunt, my sister-in-law, picked us up, and she was giving him her car because she got a new car, and it was really nice. It was Saturn, and so I talked to Greg, and I said, "Let's go visit Wayne's parents." And that's when I saw the basement, like a museum, like I was telling you. And when we were talking in his living room, and this is probably the only time I ever really talked to his father, he always say hello. His mom was the one I always talked to, but we were talking about Wayne having passed away, and I had always thought of like when the saw the planes hit the tower and like people that died there, I would say like Wayne was killed. Like Wayne was killed in 9/11, and that's why I thought of it. And it would make me very sad, obviously. But uh, his name was Arthur Rousseau, Wayne's father, and he says, when they murdered my son,
Mm,
and that just like it just like made my heart stop for a second because I'd never thought of it. It's like Wayne was murdered, and he was.
mm.
He was murdered. Yeah. So like, how many people you know that were murdered? And somebody you're really good friends with, close to, and so yeah, that. But my son was there for that, and Greg was there. Yeah. So,
Well, to put as much as possible a positive sort of conclusion to that story, that music is out there. When I had Greg on, I mentioned that the Stetz material is readily accessible on YouTube. There's an LP called Songs of Experience.
yep, yep,
There's a cassette they put out when I first heard Stetz in the early 90s called Where Were You in '82. I think there's a demo or two as well online. So
yeah,
again, in this video, I will put the links to the Stetz stuff. So
yeah,
because I get people who come into this channel for, another interview. Like I just did a big one with the old manager from Guns N' Roses. So
yeah,
that's bringing in new subscribers. So people are going to be digging around these other interviews. And my hope is, even if they don't know a certain name, they're going to check it out. So when
yeah,
you introduce people to new bands,
yeah,
particularly if it's a band featuring people who aren't here anymore,
yeah,
I want to make sure they have the access to the material. So
yeah.
in this video description, I'll put all the stat stuff in there that I can find. So
So they did a cover song of the Knickerbocker song "Lies," and that's the best that song I ever heard. I think it's on one of their cassettes with Brian singing. If you listen to the songs of experience, like where Brian kind of has to like hit like a certain key, like he goes off. Like he is Brian's not a great singer, but like if he sings certain things, like he can do it really well, and he does a great job on Lies. So that's somebody. If you want to hear a good Stetz song, they have a bunch of good songs, but that's one I like the best.
yeah, they were a good band, and I think as people learn more about the history of New Jersey, that's definitely a band that should be discussed in the same way people talk about AOD or Please Youth or mental abuse or Morning Noise or the Misfits, like
Yeah,
it should be in the same discussion. I
yeah.
feel.
Well,
And the Parasites, and of course,
yeah.
writers and
Well, Brian is interesting in that he doesn't know like one note from another, and like as a guitar player, he's a good guitar player too. But like even like the strings, like he did, like we were in the band, and I would say like tell him like something about the E string or like and like you say like EADGBE, Brian, and it's like what? He didn't even know. Like he learned music by listening to it or watching another person play, and like just he would see like their hands move and then he would do that. Like he would just like by ear and by sight could just play something. And like he create his own sounds, but like he didn't know what he was playing. Like if you asked him like what chords you're playing, he'd be like, I don't know. He's just playing. So like I never knew anybody that uh, was so disconnected from
right.
like the technical aspect of it, but still was able to play really well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, that's very punk rock.
Yeah, I don't know if you know, like, if you, I guess if you listen to songs of experience, you hear Frank is an excellent bass player.
Yeah. Yeah. There was talent in that band. I
Yeah.
mean, Wayne was a really good drummer
Oh
too.
yeah, very solid, no doubt. Like one of the most solid drummers that I ever played with for sure.
Well, I would see them in the 90s when Ted was playing bass.
Yeah,
And two things stood out for me watching Wayne. One was his big curly hair.
yeah,
And the second one was the fact the guy laid it down. He was, when you're playing with a bunch of like young hardcore punk bands, the musicianship obviously is not always there. But whenever Stetz was on the bill, like there was a real musician back there playing drums. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah, oh yeah. They were competent musically for sure with Brian guitar, Wayne drums, and Frank bass. Uh, but this I got another quick story like with Wayne's story. So we're playing at City Gardens for the opening for the Ramones, and it's going to be a used crowd. But the Ramones are well, they're mostly dead now. But let me like I said that they're dicks. That's all I could say. Really, as like as people. But anyway, uh, we you've been to City Gardens before or no?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so they have the drum rise on the stage, and so they set up their drums before our sound check, and so the drums were on this riser already when we played. So we had to set up our drums to the side of the drum rise, and there's no like Wayne's was trying to do the sound check, and the drums were going forward, like they would have fell off the stage after one song, because he just kept going. There's nothing to stop them.
Mm.
And so Wayne and I had to go outside in the parking lot and like this little weeded area. We had to find a rock big enough to put in front of his drum kit
Mm.
so it wouldn't fall off the stage. And like the sound man, the Ramones guy and the City Garden sound guy were there before the people got inside. And he said, like, don't go near the drum rise. Don't touch the drum rise. You touch the drum rise, we're going to cut you off, and you have to get off the stage. Turn off the lights, turn off the sound, and you're out. So we had to do this show like that, with the way to the side,
Mm.
the back against the wall. Uh, that was pretty wild, like looking around for the rock, and then two of us, like one, each on one side, this big rock, carrying it into the and up the stairs onto the stage, and yeah. So, but there's like a million little things like that happened, you
No,
know.
oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think we all have stories about opening for bands who weren't the most accommodating, or
yeah,
I've got a few, but I'll save them. But, when you're opening for a national act and, you're not, even though it's your local place and you're the local band, you're suddenly dog shit when you're opening up
yeah.
for a national act. Um,
Yeah, but Randy was always good to us, like good to me, I guess, because um, the Bodies of Panic band. He
yeah.
we played with some really big shows, like packed, and so he took care of us because I worked security for him too a few times. And one time when the DKs were playing, I was doing the stage. They only had one stage guy, so I was next to East Bay Ray. And like they were saying, like all you got to do is like when if somebody comes on stage, just make sure they don't bump into East Bay Ray or like any of the like or Jello, and they could dance around, they could jump off stage dive, do their thing, but don't hit them or anything. Not that I would, but so this guy came on stage and got a flannel shirt tied around his waist and like he danced in front of East Bay Ray, and then like he was spun around, and his shirt flapped out, and it went over the neck of his guitar.
Mm.
And when he went to dive out into the crowd, the guitar went with him.
Mm.
And so like I just reached out with my hand, and I grabbed the neck of the guitar, and then I pulled it back and just put it in front of East Bay. I held it there, and then he stood it and looked at it for like a couple seconds, and he said, shrugged his shoulders. He took it, he strapped it back on, and kept playing. That was a kind of a neat moment.
Yeah, yeah. Excellent, man. Well, we could probably do a five-part series of these stories.
Yep.
And perhaps we'll reconnect again at some other time. But
Okay.
for this conversation, thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing all these stories. It's been wonderful having you part of this series. And like I said, people were asking for you to come on, so I'm very happy to be able to do that, and I appreciate your time. And I know and I hope this is the first of many conversations we'll have either in podcast form or otherwise. So just
Yeah.
want to,
Feel free to call me anytime, Joel.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for being here, man. I really do appreciate it.
All right, I hope it was interesting and not too boring. But
No, no, this stuff is great, man. I know people are gonna love it. So, again, I appreciate you being so generous with your time and all these great memories, man. It's been really fantastic.
yeah, I like talking about it. So it's especially someone who knows what like now, like you, even though like you weren't old enough to be there, like you had an interest enough to find out what happened.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's cool.
Colorful stories, colorful people, happy to do it, and we will we'll do this again sometime.
Okay, Joel, have a good afternoon.
You too, man.